The night Sadie heard her mother-in-law's voice through the kitchen wall, something in her chest went very quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes before sleep, the kind that comes before a decision. She had only gone downstairs to get a glass of water. It was past midnight, and the house that belonged to her husband's mother, that had always technically belonged to her husband's mother even though nobody said it out loud, was dark except for the light under the kitchen door. She could hear two voices. One was Margot's. The other was her husband Cole. Sadie stood in the hallway in her socks and she listened. "The money clears in September," Margot was saying. "Your father-in-law left it to both of them. Sadie's parents are splitting it down the middle. If you file before then, she gets nothing. The timing has to be exact." A pause. "Cole's lower. And Jasmine?" "Jasmine understands the situation." Margot's voice didn't waver. "She's been patient. She deserves something real, not whatever this is, whatever this is." Sadie looked down at her hands. Her wedding ring caught the thin light coming from under the door. She had been married to Cole for 6 years. She had moved into this house, Margot's house, 3 years ago when Cole said it made financial sense, when he said it was temporary, when he said a lot of things she had believed because she wanted to. She went back upstairs without the water. She lay down beside her sleeping husband, and she stared at the ceiling for 4 hours. By the time the sun came up, she knew exactly what she was going to do, and she knew she wasn't going to tell a single person. Sadie had met Cole at a work event in downtown Toronto. She was 28. He was charming in the way that feels like sunlight when you're standing in it. Warm, disarming, a little blinding. He brought her coffee the next morning without being asked. He remembered the name of her sister's dog. He called when he said he would call. She thought, this is what it is supposed to feel like. Her parents liked him, which mattered to her more than she admitted back then. Her dad shook his hand firmly, and her mom, Gail, made her chicken stew the first time Cole came for dinner, and Sadie thought that meant something. It did mean something. She just didn't understand yet that meaning something and being enough are two different things. They got married in the fall. Small wedding, backyard ceremony. Her dad got a little teary during the vows, and Cole laughed gently and put a hand on his shoulder, and Sadie thought, I chose correctly. The first year was good. The second year was mostly good. The third year was when Margot started appearing more often. Margot was not a villain in the movie sense. She didn't shriek or throw things. She was controlled, precise, elegant in the way of women who have spent decades making sure no one could ever accuse them of being difficult. She wore linen in the summer and never raised her voice, and everything she said was technically a question. Sadie, don't you think it's a lot of money to spend on a couch when you're renting? Sadie, have you thought about going back to work full-time? It must be hard, being home so much. Sadie, Cole mentioned you've been feeling a little overwhelmed. Maybe a routine would help. Cole never seemed to notice. Or if he noticed, he didn't say anything, and Sadie learned that the effect was the same either way. When Margot always suggested, that it would be practical for them to move into her house while they saved for something bigger, Cole had already decided before he brought it up to Sadie. She could tell by the way he phrased it. Not what do you think? But I've been thinking. She said yes. She told herself it was temporary. That was 3 years ago. The morning after she heard them in the kitchen, Sadie made breakfast like normal. She scrambled eggs and made toast and poured Cole's coffee and set it down in front of him without looking at his face for too long. He talked about a project at work. She nodded. Margot came downstairs in her linen blouse and poured her own coffee and said, "Good morning." And Sadie said good morning back, and none of it felt like anything anymore, which she supposed was useful. After Cole left for work and Margot went to her garden, Sadie sat at the kitchen table with her phone and she opened her notes app. She wrote one word, September. Then she thought about everything Margot had said. The inheritance. Her parents' money from the land they'd sold the year before. The property that had been in her family for 2 generations. That her dad, Lawrence, and his brother had finally decided to let go of, splitting the proceeds. It was not a small amount. And someone, Cole, Margot, or both, had been paying attention to it in a way Sadie had never known. She thought about Jasmine. She knew who Jasmine was. She had known for almost 8 months, though she hadn't let herself fully name it until now. There had been signs the way there always are signs. A new careful quality to Cole's phone habits, a weekend trip she wasn't invited on, a name that appeared once in a text notification and disappeared before she could read the rest. She had pushed it down. She had told herself she was paranoid, that she was projecting, that good men don't do things like this. She had been wrong. She had given him the benefit of something he hadn't earned. She closed her notes app and opened her banking app instead. She looked at the joint account. She looked at her individual savings. The money she'd kept separate, not out of suspicion, just habit. Because her mom had always said a woman should have her own account, and Sadie had listened even when she thought it was old-fashioned advice. It wasn't old-fashioned. It was armor. She did the math. Sadie had a friend named Philippa who was a paralegal, and who had, at various points in their 12-year friendship, told Sadie things she needed to hear that Sadie hadn't wanted to hear. Philippa was sharp in the way that makes some people uncomfortable, and Sadie had always loved her for it. She texted Philippa that afternoon. Not from the house. She walked to the coffee shop on the corner, the one with the wobbly table by the window that she had always liked, and she ordered an Americano and she sat down and she texted, "Can I ask you something confidential?" Philippa replied in under a minute, "Always. Call me." So she called her. "I need to understand something about divorce and inheritance timing in Ontario," Sadie said. She kept her voice even, hypothetically. Philippa was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. "Okay, talk to me." Sadie told her what she'd heard. Not all of it, she summarized, kept it clinical, didn't let herself cry in the coffee shop. When she was done, Philippa let out a slow breath. "Right," Philippa said. "So, here's what you need to know." She explained it carefully. In Ontario, matrimonial property rules meant that an inheritance received during the marriage could, under certain conditions, still be factored into the equalization process, depending on how it was held and whether it had been commingled. But the date of separation mattered enormously. If Sadie's parents received and distributed their inheritance to Sadie before a separation date was established, and Sadie kept it separate, never put it in a joint account, never used it for shared expenses, it would likely be protected. Cole and Margot wanted her to file first, Sadie realized. Or they wanted to file before she knew, before the money arrived, before she understood what was happening. "Don't do anything sudden," Philippa said. "Don't tip them off. And get a family lawyer, a good one, not a friend of a friend, an actual family law specialist. I can give you 2 names." "I'm not ready to tell anyone yet," Sadie said. "I know, but get the names. Write them down somewhere they can't find." Sadie wrote them in her notes app under a contact she labeled dentist referral. The weeks that followed were an exercise in stillness. Sadie had always been the kind of person who showed her feelings on her face. Her mom said she couldn't hide a thought if she tried, so she had to learn, in those weeks, a different way of being. She smiled at Cole over dinner. She helped Margot weed the side garden on Saturdays. She asked about Cole's work project and remembered to follow up the next week, the way a wife who wasn't planning anything would do. Inside, she was methodical. She called the family lawyer, a woman named, she didn't write the name here, she memorized it, who had an office on Bay Street and a calm, professional manner that made Sadie feel. For the first time in months, like she was standing on solid ground. They met twice. The second time, Sadie brought documents, her individual bank statements, a list of the assets she'd brought into the marriage, her parents' tentative timeline for the land sale proceeds. "Your instinct to keep your funds separate is correct," the lawyer told her. "Don't change anything about your financial behavior right now. Normal is your best protection." Normal. Sadie could do normal. She had been performing normal for years. She also quietly began updating her resume. She hadn't worked full-time since she'd taken a contract position that ended 2 years ago, sliding into the domestic arrangement that living with Margot seemed to require. But she had skills. She'd spent 7 years in project coordination before that, and the industry she'd left hadn't gone anywhere. She emailed a former colleague. She applied to 2 positions she found on a Wednesday afternoon while Cole was at work and Margot was at her book club. She didn't tell anyone. The call from her dad came in early August. Lawrence called on Sunday mornings the way he always did, reliable as weather. "The money should move in the next few weeks," he told her. He sounded tired but satisfied. "Your uncle and I finally agreed on everything. It'll come to you and Gail through the estate. Your portion comes directly to you." "Okay, Dad," she said. She was sitting in the backyard. Margot was inside. "You doing all right, sweetheart?" Her dad had a way of asking that was actually asking, not just filling silence. She almost told him. She held the phone a little tighter. "I'm okay," she said. "I'll come up and see you and Mom soon, okay?" "Anytime," he said. "Door's always open. You know that." She did know that. She had known it for 34 years, and she had somehow, in the last 3, started to forget. She told the lawyer the next day. They made a plan for where the funds would go the moment they arrived. A new individual account at a different institution. Nothing joint, nothing mixed. One evening in late August, Sadie was upstairs folding laundry when she heard Margot on the phone in the hallway below. She wasn't trying to listen. She moved to the top of the stairs just to go get a hanger from the closet, And she heard Margot say in her controlled, pleasant voice, "It has to be before September 15th. I've already spoken with his solicitor." His solicitor. Cole had already spoken to a lawyer, which meant he had already decided, which meant the conversation she'd overheard in the kitchen months ago wasn't speculation or hypothetical. It was a timeline. They were on a schedule. Sadie went back to the laundry. She folded a shirt. She folded another shirt. Her hands were steady. She called Philippa that night from her car, parked one street over, engine off. "They have a lawyer," she said. "So do you," Philippa said. "He's going to file. Then you need to be ready. Where are you with the funds? 2 more weeks, maybe 3. Can you wait?" Sadie thought about the shirts she'd folded, the dinners she'd made, the Saturdays in the garden, the years she'd given to a house that had never been hers. "Yes," she said. "I can wait." The money from Lawrence arrived on a Thursday. Sadie saw the notification on her phone while she was standing in the grocery store, in the cereal aisle, holding a box of oats. She stood there for a moment. The fluorescent lights hummed. She put the oats in her cart. She finished her shopping. She drove home and made dinner. That night, after Cole fell asleep, she transferred the funds exactly as her lawyer had directed. She took a screenshot of the confirmation. She emailed it to herself from an account she'd created 6 weeks earlier, with a password she'd never written down. Done. She lay in the dark for a while. She thought about her dad's voice on the phone. Doors always open. She thought about the kitchen light under the door. Margot's voice. Whatever this is. She thought, whatever this is over. 3 days later, Cole sat her down at the kitchen table. Margot was in the other room. Sadie could hear the television. Cole had a particular expression she'd seen on him before, the one that meant he had rehearsed what he was about to say. "I think we need to talk," he said. "Okay," she said. He talked about growing apart. He talked about feeling like something between them had changed. He did not mention Jasmine. He did not mention Margot. He did not mention the money or the lawyer or September 15th. He talked around the center of everything the way someone does when they think the other person doesn't know what the center is. Sadie listened. She let him finish. Then she said, very calmly, "I think you're right. I've actually already spoken with a lawyer. I have the paperwork started." Cole blinked. The rehearsed expression shifted into something she didn't have a name for. What?" "I've had a few weeks to think about this," she said. "I think it's the right decision for both of us." He looked at her for a long moment. She could see him trying to recalculate, trying to figure out what she knew and when she'd known it, trying to find the edge of her information. "Sadie, I'm going to stay with my parents for a while," she said. "I've already arranged it with them. I'm going to start packing this weekend if that's all right with you, or next weekend. I'm flexible." From the other room, the television went quiet. Margot had heard. Sadie didn't look toward the doorway. "I want this to be straightforward," Sadie said. She kept her voice level. "I think it can be if we let it." Cole didn't say anything else. There was nothing really left to say. He had arrived at this conversation holding all the cards, and she had already quietly dealt herself a different hand. Sadie's mom, Gail, cried when she arrived. Not sad crying, relieved crying, the kind that comes when a person realizes their worry has an end. "I didn't know it had gotten that bad," Gail said. "I know," Sadie said. "I didn't let you know. That was a mistake." She was sitting at her parents' kitchen table in Barrie, her bags in the spare room, a mug of tea in front of her. Outside it was raining. She could hear her dad moving around upstairs, the familiar sound of his footsteps. "You're okay?" Gail asked. "I'm going to be okay," Sadie said, "which is different from being okay right now, but I know the difference." Gail nodded. She reached across and put her hand over Sadie's. The divorce process was not fast and it was not simple, but it was, as Sadie had told Cole it could be, straightforward. Her lawyer handled the equalization process. Because the inheritance had never been commingled, it remained hers. Because she had documentation of her individual contributions and assets, the division was clear. Cole got a lawyer who pushed on a few things. Her lawyer pushed back. In the end, Cole kept what was his. Sadie kept what was hers. Margot's name appeared in no legal document, which was perhaps the most accurate reflection of her actual standing in the marriage. Sadie started work again in October. Project coordinator at a mid-sized firm, the kind of role she could do with her eyes closed, but that gave her a reason to get up in the morning and a paycheck that was entirely, completely, only hers. Her colleagues were kind. Her commute was a podcast and a coffee. She ate lunch when she wanted. She came home to a small apartment in a building on the edge of downtown Barrie. Not fancy, not particularly large, but hers in the way that word means something when you understand what its absence felt like. She called her dad on Sunday mornings. She had dinner with Philippa on the last Tuesday of every month, and Philippa would order the most expensive thing on the menu and make Sadie laugh until her face hurt. She didn't date for a long time. There was no dramatic reason for this, no wound she was nursing in silence, no vow she was keeping. She just didn't have the energy for it, and she'd spent enough years doing things she didn't have the energy for. She decided to wait until she wanted to, and to trust herself to know the difference. When she was ready, she would know. It was almost a year later when a colleague at work mentioned someone. A friend of a friend, a man named, it doesn't matter what his name was, not yet. This is not a story about him. What matters is that Sadie said maybe, and meaning it when she said it. The date was coffee, a cafe with comfortable chairs, a Tuesday afternoon in September when the light was changing and the trees outside the window were starting to turn. He was thoughtful and funny, and he asked questions and listened to the answers. He didn't perform. He didn't rehearse. He was just present in the room with her, the way some people manage to be. She drove home afterward and sat in her parked car outside her building for a few minutes. The sky was going pink and orange above the street. She thought about the kitchen light under the door, Margot's voice. Whatever this is. She thought, it turns out I always knew what this was. I just had to be ready to act on it. She got out of the car. She went upstairs to her apartment. She made dinner, something simple, something she liked. She was 34 years old and she had never felt more like herself.